Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our EUC application delivery webinar with Joe Clarke. Before we begin, I just wanted to announce our raffle for the Apple Watch will be pulled and announced on Monday, so keep an eye out for that. I'll now pass control over to Joe. Thank you.
Hey, good morning and good afternoon, guys, wherever you might be. I hope if you're Eastern time, you've got a plate of hot food in front of you or something that you can eat while you're just sort of going through this application delivery webinar with me. So one of the things we're going to be doing today is we're actually going to be doing a little bit of live interaction as a part of this. So if you got a web browser handy, you can just go to poll.ev/AdvizeX, or you can download the iOS application, or just use a web browser on a phone, anything like that, because we'll just have a couple interactive polls just to see, what you guys think, let you guys sort of sound off a little bit on what we're doing. So while you guys are downloading and getting that ready, do the intros real quick. My name is Joe Clarke. I'm a principal architect with AdvizeX, and a big part of what I've been doing has been data center and application delivery, both from a presentation layer perspective and from a data center and infrastructure perspective. So I hold 2 VCDXs, and I've been working with virtualization tech for about the past 6-7 years. So that's just a little bit about me. So first, we've got one poll that I'd like to do that just sort of says, hey, where are you guys from? I'm just curious to kind of see on a map. So if you guys can load up poll.ev, polleverywhere.com/AdvizeX, and just say, hey, this is where I'm at. That'd be kind of cool, just to kind of see where we're spread out. All right, got one from Columbus there. Cool, welcome. A couple more in Ohio, okay. And if it's on the phone, it's a little bit hard to click it, so it's kind of one of those things where you got to click it multiple times and it'll just move it. So cool. Well, hopefully we'll get more of you guys in on that interaction as we sort of move through the webinar. So the agenda for today is we kind of want to go back in time a little bit and talk a bit about the past of application delivery. I want to talk about consumerization and how that's actually changed a large part of the way we've worked in the past decade. We talk about some advancements and how we're delivering applications. And then we want to talk a little bit about AdvizeX and why we're sort of positioned as one of the leaders in modernizing application delivery. So if we look back on the timeline, this is a focused timeline that I've put together sort of client computing. And a lot of it really starts with the mainframe in the 1960s. The idea was the entire computer and the way you interacted with the computer was entirely located in one room. In the 1970s and 1971, IBM came out with the 3270 terminal, right, where we developed our love for function keys, which are those keys off to the right. And the idea here was that terminal allowed you access to the mainframe without actually being in the room with the mainframe. And if some of you are familiar with terminal emulators, like a TN3270 program, that is exactly what those programs based on Windows are meant to do, is emulate that 3270 terminal interaction. And in 1980, IBM hired Microsoft to develop an operating system for its PC, which, if we know anything about Microsoft, they released Windows 1.0, which did look like that with the SAD clock and everything else and Minesweeper in 1985. And then moving forward, we've got in 1989, Citrix Systems was founded. And in 1998, VMware was founded. And you can kind of see the theme here is that we're talking a little bit about remote client computing and a little bit about, just regular Windows computing. In 2001, we had Windows XP going GA. We had VMware releasing a GSX and ESX, and we had MetaFrame XP sort of coming to the scene here. So what we see is there's actually a good bit of remote presentation starting up between 1989 and the year 2000. And if we continue forward on this, one of the things we noticed is in 2005, Citrix sort of rebranded a presentation server. They changed away from, MetaFrame. In 2008, Citrix changed presentation server then to XenApp. And at this point in time, VMware GA'd their VDM, or Virtual Desktop Manager product. When we skip forward to 2009, VMware releases not only VMware View 4, but Microsoft GA's Windows 7, and I've sort of left off a couple Microsoft operating system releases because, well, to be perfectly honest, they just aren't worth even talking about. And then in 2010, we had the iPad released, which was revolutionary in terms of creating a tablet that was not meant to be used with a stylus. So that was very, very key in a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, simply because without a tablet without a stylus is very different from an experience where you have to use a keyboard or a mouse or a touchpad. And that was pretty evolutionary and made a big difference in the past decade of how we've done things. Also, VMware released VMware View 5, and XenApp 6 was launched in 2010. In 2014, VMware Horizon 6 was released, and then in 2015, Windows 10 was released. And Windows 10 wanted to be called Windows 1, but it really wasn't able to be called Windows 1 because of what we saw in the previous slide. Windows 1.0 was already taken. So Windows 10 is sort of what they skipped straight to, right, from Windows 8. And then in 2016, VMware GA'd a suite of products known as Workspace 1. So I had another question for you guys that I kind of wanted to put out there if you guys have the Poll Everywhere app up. So for you guys, when remoting in from home, would you say most of your users use a VPN client, access individual remote applications, access remote virtual desktops, or typically don't remote in? So we've got plenty of folks using VPN clients. Yep, and that's pretty common. A couple using individual applications. Cool. Awesome. And the thing I wanted to call out with this is that, pretty much everybody has some form of remote access for employees to get into a protected segment of the network to work. In today's day and age, the option D, I typically almost always see that as 0. Unless it's some sort of, absolutely like crazy secure requirement surrounding that. So thanks for jumping in there. So why does any of this matter? Why does looking at the history and saying, well, why do we even go along that timeline? Why does that matter? Well, the real reason for that is because everything's going to change based off of what's happening in the industry today. The way that we've managed things in the past has changed over 5 and 10 year segments pretty drastically. And looking forward, that is something that we need to be aware of as well. So if we look at today, why is client computing changing? What are some of the factors that are changing client computing? A big part of that is consumerization. What does that mean? We've got sort of a modern workforce that, just like you guys have alluded to, with requiring that mobile access, we've got a modern workforce of people that are wanting to work anywhere, and they also want their apps anywhere. We've got people with requirements that say, you know what I would love to do is I would love to have my experience be just like Netflix. And that's one of the things where this is truly companies like Netflix and others that say, hey, you know what? I can pause my movie on my TV and literally fire it up on my iPad or a tablet or another computer and pick up right where I left off without any problem whatsoever. That concept of changing devices but having the work stream be the same is something that's been brought to bear in the enterprise from consumerization, from consumer grade products. And so what happens is you have executives that say, I can get this at home with my consumer grade experience, and a lot of these born in the cloud apps. Why can't we do that here? Why can't we, better the way we are doing things here? So that consumerization, the idea of fast updates and feature-rich experiences for end users is something that executives and companies alike are really starting to strive to. And a lot of that comes back to that force circle with the modern workforce and saying the modern workforce is really what's driving a lot of those changes. And the mobile workforce is only growing. So there were 1.32 billion mobile workers in 2014, and it's set to be 1.75 billion in 2020. And that, along with the fact that simply the way we work is changing, is just two things that are absolutely massive in addressing client computing. So if we look at a couple of interesting specs, 2/3 of companies reported that they're actively planning to re-engineer their mobility strategy. And we see that by 2018, in the bottom right-hand corner here, 95% of enterprises will have either a choose your own device or a formal bring your own device plan in place. It's just kind of, it's pretty much a telltale sign from what I can see looking at the industry as well, that the way that we work is changing. I mean, just by way of personal example, the other day I was on the airplane and I realized that I actually didn't want to pull out my laptop. I didn't want to pull out my tablet. I was able to just go in airplane mode and do all of my work from my phone. And I could literally just, email, I could open apps, I could open offline documents, I could do pretty much everything I needed to do straight from my phone. And it was kind of this aha moment where I was like, wow, this is the best device for what I need right now because, I have no elbow space right now, so I can't pull out a larger device. But it just sort of goes to show that this is sort of what's happening and trending with people wanting to use different devices and desktop usage overall being shrinking. So on that note, I'm just curious, how many of you guys would say you use so many different computing devices in a week? So if you said I use, 4 or more, 5 or more, 3 or more, something along those lines. Okay, yeah, that's at least 2 is what it seems like right now. Most everybody has a smartphone and a computer of some sort, so that pretty much takes 1 sort of straight out. But this is really telling as well, and I love that we're saying it's only 5 or more, because it's, I think the average number of devices that we're actually seeing people pulling in is somewhere along the lines of like 3.2, and to see this is sort of lining up with that directly is actually kind of awesome. So if we look at the primary catalyst for what I would say this is today, if I had to say what the primary catalysts for change are within the way we're addressing mobility and client solutions today, it's Windows 10 and Microsoft and part of the drastic way that they're making changes to change the way that operating system is managed by corporations. I would say it's Chromebooks, because just like Microsoft, Chromebooks are changing the application delivery and management landscape altogether. And then I would say Apple with iOS devices and macOS devices alike, that they are still sort of leading the way for application, in the mobility space from an application standpoint. So Android is up there too, but these are the ones that I sort of see. And the reason I say that Windows 10 is one of the primary catalysts is Windows 10 is sort of a stake in the ground when it comes to actually integrating Windows 10 with work or school along with your personal things. So if we look at, the settings page on your PC and you're running 1703 or later of Windows 10, you can literally there's a section of Windows 10 marked Access Work or School, meaning that it is a native function of the operating system for you to be able to sign into your work account from a personal computer. This is a massive change in the old school mindset that we've had, where it's like you sign into work, you come in on your first day, you get given a computer, it's been imaged, it's your computer, don't break it. If it falls off the table, it'll take some time to get it back together, and we'll just keep going. So it really is sort of this forked moment where we see the ability for companies to allow people to use bring your own devices with secure policies surrounding that. So when we look at how that's then managed, we have to look at a different way of managing those operating systems, all of them together, whether it's a tablet, whether it's a phone, whether it's a laptop, whether it's Mac, Windows, Android, iOS, doesn't matter what it is. We're looking at changing systems management the way we used to do it, sort of with like, we build packages and we push things from one product to another product, to unified endpoint management, meaning something is going to manage all of these things. And this is exactly why Microsoft has rewritten their operating system to make good on this. And if we look at, Gartner sort of agrees with this philosophy, they've actually retired their quadrant for traditional client management. Meaning, so your SCCM, Tivoli, Landesk, all those guys, they actually retired that quadrant for traditional management of endpoints, with the reason being that they're giving way to the newer ways of managing those operating systems. So either you can have no device management or complete device management on this spectrum of choose your own, bring your own, and every company is different. Every company has different policies and regulations they have to deal with, and every company has different comfort levels. So for example, I worked with one customer who only just recently started giving their employees laptops, like within the past year. And that was a big step for them. And so for them to be like, hey, we're just going to do a bring your own device policy and everything like rock away, like culturally and the way that IT would have to react to that change didn't really fit to go straight to bring your own device. We're not going to necessarily manage it. We can control policy on it, but ultimately it's your device. So either way, we're seeing people want to offer the spectrum or have a spectrum of choice available to them. And the interesting problem that having so many different endpoints has sort of brought about is kind of simple. It's kind of one of those moments where it's like, well, duh, Joe. The more ways we have to get applications and data, the more things we have to manage on the back end for IT. And that creates absolutely just a ton of challenges. We see security and data protection challenges. We see operational efficiency for IT challenges. We see in order for you to actually hold a bunch of desktops on the shelf, that takes capital, that takes time to make sure that they're up to date and can be shipped out. We see that it's a continual struggle to be patched and updated and protected against ransomware and malware. And we definitely want to be able to provide flexibility and endpoint choice for our customers, which is the business. And a lot of times that's not easy when we have several things that we have to do. So if I was to ask you guys how long it takes you to restore a user to full productivity if their primary PC would be unavailable, what would you say is probably an adequate answer to that question? Maybe, probably not hours, maybe 1 to 2 days for some people. And the more than a week is still hanging out there at 0. So that's a good thing. You guys are on the ball with that. Excellent. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to one more. How many usernames and password combinations does your average user know? One and only one. Would you say they know 2 or more? Would you say they know 3 or more, 4 or more, or they say 1, but they probably have access to a shared account? 4 or more, yeah. Yeah, and I should have specified for work on this as well. So like as it relates to work, obviously that they have personal accounts and things like that. But for work, how many username and password combinations does your user know? And that's pretty much telling. So a big part of what we wanted to talk about today was the secure digital workspace. And what is that? And why is this sort of a newer way that we're seeing of delivering applications? Well, the way we define it at AdvizeX is it's an application and desktop delivery service with a focus on rapid and secure access, meaning that we're trying to solve those problems that we see, that we talked about earlier. Some of the outcomes we'd want to try to get when we're looking at implementing a secure digital workspace is improving our security posture. We want to lower operational management expenses. We want to improve application availability, meaning we can get users back up and into their applications faster. We want to enable remote workers for cost reduction. We want to decrease that time it takes to get a new app rolled out. We want multiple device support, so any device, any app. We want faster onboarding and offboarding with lower IT effort, so it's not a fire drill every Monday morning when you got a new hire that's coming in. So what's in a secure digital workspace? There's an application delivery mechanism for both remote and locally installed applications on pretty much every major platform. So in other words, if it can't be natively installed, you can access it remotely. Single sign-on for all applications, including SaaS apps, intelligent security that shows proactive alerting, and consolidated and distributed data, which is enveloped with both policy and security posture enforcement. Meaning if you want files, your users to have files on their devices, that's fine, but you might want to keep track of which files are being checked out from the company and which files are on which devices, and you might only say we want a subset of that. Whereas for the rule would be, hey, we want to consolidate the data in the data center walls in our protected network. So conceptually, how does this look? A lot of times when we're looking at a digital workspace, we're either looking at either a single region or sort of an always-on architecture where we're saying we want to provide everything either in a single data center or in a multi-data center fashion. And more often than not, that follows the mission-critical application servers. And this is one of the things where there's a lot of buzz right now about DaaS, desktop as a service offerings, such as Amazon Workspaces, Horizon Cloud, other things that allow you to actually host applications on cloud services. And VMware is even coming out with Horizon on Azure real soon, which is fantastic. And one of the things that we're seeing with that is that the mission critical applications, if they're far enough away from those desktops, it doesn't make a ton of sense. So for example, if you have a CAD worker that it needs a bunch of large models, and those large models are in a data center that's far away from wherever the instance is, it doesn't necessarily make sense. So when we're looking at the location of the services, it becomes very, very important. So some of the solution components that we've got listed out here, application presentation via either individual or virtual desktop. We've got a catalog, universal endpoint management capabilities, and a wide breadth of other software solutions that come into it. So if we were to look at, what does a typical solution like this sort of entail? Well, we've pretty much got a requirement where we say a lot of these applications run on Microsoft, so we pretty much have to have Microsoft in the picture, and then as well as VMware. So when we talk about the security digital workspace at AdvizeX, we say that, hey, if you've got a preferred networking, compute storage vendor, even, some of the security vendors you might already have partners with, that's not a problem. We can work with those. But a lot of the solution components that we've seen work very well are listed here on this slide. So if I wanted to sort of like walk you through what a secure digital workspace looks like from a logical perspective, sort of from the bottom up, we start with gray boxes, meaning I don't really care what kind of hardware it is. We talk about HCI and x86 compute sort of being this idea that we can have a building block, a foundation of our digital workspace being hyperconverged infrastructure with Tor networking. If we sort of step up into the platform, at that point in time, we start talking about VMware NSX and vSphere, vSAN, and some security options on the end. We step up into the application presentation, endpoint management, identity management, and productivity and file. And at that point, we're looking at Workspace ONE, which is the suite of applications that deliver Office and Windows. And then at the top, in order for us to actually have some sort of control and monitoring over the solution, we looked at user behavior analytics, capacity planning, experience monitoring, and everything else that we need to ensure that our users are having a successful experience with their applications. So then if we want to look even closer and sort of double click down into Workspace ONE and say, so what is it then? Well, conceptually, if we look at the left side of the screen over here, we've got any device. So whether that's a laptop or a phone, a tablet, whatever it is, that can go to the unified app catalog, which is in blue at the top. The idea there is that unified app catalog is capable of either connecting them remotely to an application or installing natively on that application or single signing that user into a SaaS-based application. And as we look at the logical layout of what Workspace ONE actually entails, we sort of see that there's three gray boxes in the middle. We've got identity services, we've got unified endpoint management services, and we've got virtualization services. So as we sort of step forward through that, those are basically the three core components that make up Workspace ONE. What are those three components? We've got VMware Identity Manager that is handling our identity management. We've got the VMware Horizon Suite, which is handling the virtualization aspect, and we've got VMware AirWatch, which is handling our unified endpoint management. So if we're looking at Identity Manager, it really is the heart of Workspace ONE. It's the self-service access that allows you to choose your device. It allows you to present conditional access, meaning if you would like someone to access certain applications when you have a little bit more control over the device, you can specify that. So in other words, if my device is not enrolled into the unified endpoint management software, I might have to perform a strong authentication to make sure that I am who I say I am, and it isn't just some password that someone left logged into a browser. And Identity Manager truly is the heart of Workspace ONE. And this is sort of a picture of how it looks. It can be either web-based or mobile-based. There's native applications on both Android, iOS, and it can just be accessed through a web browser. So one of the really cool things about Identity Manager as well is the simple fact that you can do certificate-based authentication, which for the long time in the VMware portfolio has sort of been an Achilles heel. I've had a couple customers that have large virtual desktop implementations that have said to me, hey, how can I do certificate-based authentication? We enroll all of our desktops so that they have a user-based certificate for the user. And the answer was, there's not really a good one. Well, now you can actually, when enrolling the device, you basically build the user a user certificate that only they can use on their account. Once the device is enrolled, you can then control the authentication policies for that user and basically have it so that as long as the computer has a security policy that you deem A-OK and they can log in and with a policy that you think is good, that they can single sign on into their applications using certificate-based authentication, meaning they literally don't have to type a password again. They just log into the laptop as normal, and just logging into the laptop or the device as normal is authentication enough simply because of the user-based certificate enrollment. And that is controllable so that you can step that up as well, so that if you have certain applications you would rather have someone type a password for, that you can do that as well. Another key component of the digital workspace is the virtualization stack. So we look at delivering either native applications or desktops as a part of the experience. And this is pretty key. And this is an example pod block architecture drawing of what a horizon view environment might look like. Some of these, this is one of those things where I've had this conversation more often than not recently, where it's like, well, we probably have some Citrix and we've got some VMware, and we might be running Citrix on VMware, and we're kind of trying to figure this whole thing out. And a lot of what I've said is, really since Horizon 6, the idea here that VMware is pretty much feature parity with Citrix. It used to be in the early, 2000s that Citrix was way ahead simply because they could do individual applications, and VMware was sort of known as like they just spin up desktops and connect you to them. And the simple truth is they both have layering technologies that are available in their suites. They both have both desktop and application presentation. They both have user experience management tools, so persistence of settings and preferences. So, both of them are pretty darn well feature parity. So I have a question for you guys that's kind of related, kind of not, but it's, I have experienced a virus that propagated from desktop to desktop like wildfire. Yes, not like wildfire, but yes, and nope. Curious to see what you guys think about that. So yes, not like wildfire, but yes and nope. Okay, cool. And I, just by way of personal anecdote, one of the malware outbreaks that I fought personally was Conficker, and that was just a brutal one that I found out, the hard way, that it required an engine update for my anti-malware product that I was running when I was working in-house, rather than just a definition update. So that was one of those things where it was just absolutely crazy. But point being, one of the things that we say is an essential part of the secure digital workspace at AdvizeX is some form of EastWest firewalling. Some way to say we must be able to protect these resources so that we can place firewalls in between them. So what we end up looking at is with, some kind of virtual desktop or something like that is usually, and then for physical desktops as well, there's usually either, /24s or /23 networks with some odd host in them where we say, this is how many desktops we've got, and that's the desktop subnet, and that's the desktop subnet. Well, the problem is when you do that, it becomes very, very difficult to block traffic inside of that broadcast domain that all those desktops are a part of. So it adds complexity to the network, especially on the virtual side, and it doesn't allow for granular network security. So what we've seen is we basically say, if we include NSX as a part of that, which is VMware software-defined networking product, it allows us to perform east-west firewalling with literally one rule, so that we can drop all the network traffic from a network destined to a network. Because in truth, desktops don't necessarily need to talk to other desktops, or application presentation servers don't need to talk to other application presentation servers. They need to talk to their apps and to authentication services and other things that matter, but they don't need to talk to each other. So if there's a way that we can avoid that propagation, it can really help. And this might be a screen that is something that might be of note to you, because This is something I've been helping a lot of customers with, because ever since CryptoLocker and a lot of these outbreaks where we have folks that are, getting these spreading from desktop to desktop, the question is still coming up, well, hey, even like there's always a new 0 day. So how do we prevent this from a procedural standpoint? And the simple answer is you simply have to prevent it from spreading to other devices. And one of the ways we can actually do that is by sucking in those Windows instances and saying, if we have them centralized, we can prevent EastWest firewalling very, very easily inside of the data center. So that's a big part of the reason why we say NSX is a key function of the secure digital workspace for us. Then when we look at the second component of the secure digital workspace, AirWatch is our unified endpoint management solution. So the idea here is that it can literally manage all endpoints and use cases and allow you to do a couple really unique things, such as out-of-the-box configuration, meaning if someone goes to Best Buy and picks up a laptop, they can literally have an out-of-box experience where they're signing into work, automatically enrolling, and automatically having their applications and shortcuts pushed down to the desktop simply by signing into work, as we were shown earlier in the presentation, which is a really big thing. Over-the-air updates and management and reporting on those updates is very key for a lot of folks, because not just updating those computers, but knowledge of the version. So perfect example, right? Mac OS. Anybody hear about the root bug that happened just recently, where basically if you typed in root and pushed the button twice, you can basically get in with root access? Right, well, that was version 10.12.1 that was fixed in. So if you wanted to say, hey, we need to make changes to any computer that's less than 10.12.1 on this patch, you could do that. And you can also force over-the-air updates and management. Asset tracking is another great function of unified endpoint management, setting policies and ensuring that they're enforced, and then a full lifecycle management, meaning that if someone that we were talking about went to Best Buy, bought that laptop, and it's theirs, but we own some of that data on it, we want to be able to wipe that data without getting rid of their kids' kindergarten pictures or something like that, right? So we want to make sure that we are allowing ourselves full lifecycle management. And a big part of Identity Manager and AirWatch together, again, is this concept of the unified universal catalog, meaning that in that catalog, we want to be able to push applications to any operating system. But not only that, we want it to dynamically shift and sort of shape shift to match whatever endpoint it is that we're connecting from. Because if I say I wanted to install like paint.net on my Mac, well, good luck. That's a .NET application. You're not going to do that. So that might be one that I might access remotely on a Mac. Whereas when I'm on a Windows PC, I might say, hey, that's an application I would like. Go ahead and push. I would like a native install, please. I don't want to run it remotely. That's something I would like to have in a local session. So those are some of the things that we say are just absolutely essential to Identity Manager plus AirWatch together. And what this slide is talking about is really the conditional access, meaning so that if we want to change our policy, if we want to say we would rather you use multi-factor authentication if we would like to say, you know what, for this you can use certificate-based auth and not even type a password because this is less important, we can do that for every single application in the catalog. So Rolt AdvizeX execution. So I wanted to talk about our approach and methodology. And the proven service lifecycle that we have is plan, build, manage. And that's sort of those three bigger pie pieces in the middle of that wheel that we got in the top right-hand corner there. And we're looking at assess, design, build, pilot, deploy, optimize. And we've found that this is absolutely essential in planning any major changes to Workspace. So when we're looking at a bring your own device policy, when we're looking at how are we going to handle application delivery, how are we going to manage additional new devices, how are we going to increase the amount of time or decrease the amount of time it takes to get new applications out there, these are the things that we're looking at. We're saying, hey, if we don't plan first and say what's important to you as a business, because it might be something different. For some people, it might be a security initiative. For other people, it might be simply increasing application availability. For some, it might be operational management of assets and saying we would just much rather have a bunch of desktops behind our data center walls because if they're connected all the time, it's a lot easier to manage them. And sort of looking at, an example summary of how we might go through that when we're doing that is we'll typically do a strategic planning session where we say, hey, big picture, does this make sense? Is this something that, makes sense for you as a business? Look at a platform design, pilot into production, and then operate and optimize. And AdvizeX truly has veteran experience in both platform mobility and identity management. And inside of AdvizeX, we have a virtualization practice, security practice, networking, and Microsoft, all which are key components of the secure digital workspace. And we have practices devoted to each one of them. So why Rolt AdvizeX? We bring proven design and implementation processes. We also bring high quality deliverables. And one of the biggest things that I love talking about AdvizeX is we truly do shoulder to shoulder implementation, which means we do not just come in, set something up and say, here you go, here's a document that says what's what. No, our implementation style is shoulder to shoulder because we believe that in order for you to be successful, you have to be a part of that implementation. You have to be a part of the setup to bring up the tips and tricks and all that good stuff. And we also see increased employee satisfaction and performance productivity. So we do deliver comprehensive designs, and this is just one of those slides that we've got where we're showing some, sanitized output from some of our design exercises that we've got. And one of the things that I love talking about is that as a part of the strategic meetings and design meetings that we go through, that Gartner quadrant that's in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, when we're looking at that, we're looking at the business saying, where does a use case for application of technology make sense? We're not necessarily saying, hey, what cool thing would be neat? It's like, well, no, what provides high business value and is easier to implement? Those are the kind of questions that we're asking when we're going through a lot of our engagements with folks. So if we look to, I like this slide because does this guy sound familiar? And when I'm talking about this guy, I'm talking about somebody that you may have interacted with that would basically has an agenda to get something sold to you. And it's like, hey, I'm selling these fine canvases. And then I remember as a customer always being like, yeah, you know what? But I really wanted art. I didn't want to buy a canvas. I wanted to buy art. So if I just buy this empty canvas from you, then I'm just sort of left on my own to paint it myself. So why partner with AdvizeX? Because you want the best of the best to partner with. If you're looking at that, you want a painter. You don't necessarily want to just buy art off the shelf. You want a painter that can actually help you. And you definitely want a Bob Ross quality painter because let's be perfectly honest, when you're targeting 4 nines of uptime, there are no happy little mistakes. I just got to be perfectly honest with you about that. So when we're looking at the standard of quality that we have at AdvizeX, we won the Global Partner of the Year award with VMware, and we have a 96% customer loyalty and retention rate. We've got over 800 certifications, of which many include the top tier certifications, VCDXs, CCIEs, and basically a lot of the top certifications that you can ask for are seriously adhered to and a big part of what we do at AdvizeX. So our strong strategic partnerships, obviously, that we have help enable our innovation. So if you want to know more about the secure digital workspace, the cool part is pretty much everything that I talked about today in this is a full-featured environment that you can simply connect into and test out. You can simply go into it. You can test launching applications. You can enroll your device. You can check out the auto launch-in, and it's sandboxed and very, very, very easy to consume. VMware has done a great job at providing this as a 100% free resource that you can use to get the experience and look and feel of it. This is not meant as like a POC type tool, because if you want to POC it, normally it's, hey, I would like to push my application, see interaction with my Active Directory services, those kind of things. But what this allows you to do is sort of get that look and feel of what a secure digital workspace might look like. So I would say if you guys need some help with the BYOD policy, some strategy help, if you need upgrading to Windows 10 help, if you're looking at pretty much anything involving mobility or SaaS application expansion, those are some things that AdvizeX is definitely positioned to help with. So that's pretty much what I've got for today. So at this time, I'll hand it back to Nicole, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. If anybody has any questions, feel free to submit them now, and we can answer them live. Give it a couple minutes for a few questions to come through if there are any. In the meantime, just another reminder that we will be pulling the raffle winner for the Apple Watch on Monday, and we will announce then.
Great. And one question did come in. So to figure out who to work with on test drive, you can either contact, if you know who your AdvizeX representative is, you can contact them and they will get you connected with a resource that is able to get you not only signed up for, but actually walk you through the demonstration of a test drive. And if you don't know, you can simply email me. My email is jclarke, JCLARKE at AdvizeX, ADVIZEX.com. And if you would like to get connected up, I can get you connected to the appropriate resource in your region. Okay, cool. Seems like that about does it for questions.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. We'll give you 15 minutes of your time back here. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, guys.